Good morning or good afternoon. We're live from Dubai Future Forum here in Dubai. A bit of a podcast first, actually, a crossover between two podcasts with Joanna Lepore looking outside and myself, Ben, behind Ree-thinking Sustainability. Esteemed guests here today, we want to bring in some diversity of thoughts, some real activists out there in the world of futurists. We've got Marc Buckley, we've got Dina Baenninger, and obviously Joanna Lepore. As ever, I always find the opening speeches here at the Dubai Future Forum very inspirational. I think we're here off the backdrop of COP29, which let's see the outcome when the dust has settled. But whenever I'm here in Dubai at the forum, I'm always sort of feeling very optimistic. And I think we all need that after the week we've had off the back of COP. Marc, good to see you again, as always. Please give me an update. What have you been working on over the last year? What are you here and hoping for from the forum this year?
I'm always optimistic, but the world is really at odds this year. So we've had numerous wars, conflicts. We've had the Trumpocalypse, which is now the nightmares come to reality, and the world's in a lot of changes. So I just come from COP29, Baku, Azerbaijan. It's really interesting how so many people didn't show up and how many in that showed their protest, as well as what's going on with the conflicts and situation in the world. So it's a big time, but I'm still optimistic for the simple fact that I believe in the exponential function. I believe that we can make quantum leaps and bounds once we come to the realization how a beautiful life we can all have on this earth, and a long life for intergenerations, well beyond 8 generations into the future, if we just buckle down and create that future that is a world that works for everyone, one that no human being suffers, no environment suffers in that process, that we all thrive and flourish on this beautiful planet of ours and leave legacy to your children, my grandchildren, that is worth living, instead of giving them something to inherit. That's a pretty bad deal.
A lot to unpack there already. Dina, obviously you and Marc work very closely together. Can you give me a bit of or our listeners a bit of an insight into obviously some of the work that you're working towards, which we've obviously discussed off mic already, but it sounds fascinating. Can you give us a bit of a flavor around what you're working towards at the moment?
I'm the executive director of strategic partnerships and alliances at the Aloha's Regenerative Foundation. And at the core of the foundation is to not only build alliances, but also build and support projects which are steered towards accelerating the transformation of the dysfunctional systems of our world into regenerative ones. And for this also to employ not only policy and activism, but all dimensions of life, to engage much more into creative ways of doing things, including the arts. I'm an artist myself, but also to include arts and creativity in a strategic way to accelerate the transformation or transform it into a regenerative world that works well for everyone, and to do it also in a way that includes the individual transformation, because I think one of the main problems why we are not moving forward faster is because it requires also individual transformation, which is actually a very delicate and tough problem, but without it, it's almost impossible to reach it.
Yeah. And they're some of the hardest things to change. I think, if you look on an individual level, behaviors and motivations, they're the hardest things to change in terms of your personality, your DNA. But unfortunately, as we all know, the old age, human nature can be inherently selfish, and it's obviously trying to change that behavior and makeup to have people coming together to achieve the goals, essentially to get us out and navigate ourselves out of this mess. Some points there that you've both raised, which I think we can come back to. Joanna, keen to let you take the mic a little bit, but also, you're involved in some really cool futurist work as well. I'm quite interested to hear around, what you're working on individually at the moment as well. If you want to share a bit more about that, please.
That sounds good. I mean, thank you for the opportunity to sit in here. I feel like a bit of a gate crasher on your podcast, but we threw this together really quickly and we're winging it. And I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation, because you can't talk about the future without talking about climate change or climate catastrophes that we're facing that disrupt the businesses that we operate in and the systems that govern us. So what I love about the Dubai Future Forum is that it brings together this multidisciplinary thinking, this kind of very diverse thinking around the biggest topics that influence us as societies, as companies, as human beings. And I too was really inspired by the opening this morning because I think that the foundation is putting a much more philosophical kind of human lens over a lot of these issues that we're facing. So it's important for us to talk about climate science and business progress and how technology can help to solve some of these problems, et cetera. But also to ask the more philosophical questions like, what are we all working towards? What is our long term vision? How are we going to do this together so it benefits everybody? So I'm here on behalf of FIG, which is our Foresight Insight Group, which is a network of people who do foresight inside of corporations. So some of the biggest corporations in the world. A lot of these industries that are either, say, food, agriculture, snacking, oil, automotive, a lot of these industries that have been around for a while that we're trying to get our business leaders to think a little bit differently about how they might be disrupted or how we should be making change to sustain these industries, but in a way that is beneficial for society and for the human beings which we serve. So it's a really meaty, pardon the pun, challenge and podcast that I have on the side, which is looking outside, is all about then how do you look at these familiar topics that we feel like we know inside out from a different perspective? So how do you bring in diverse views? How do you talk to people you don't normally talk to? And how do you maybe challenge yourself and how you approach problems? So with that being said, maybe I'll hand it back over to you to introduce yourself and like, what are you hoping to get out of the forum and out of conversations like this?
No, thank you for that. I feel we're in quite a unique position where I have the exposure to so many different parts of society mainly on a corporate level. So working with multinationals, I work with a lot of like investors, I work with family offices. So people who really hold the keys, I believe, to make the transition. There's some great examples of SMEs and individuals who are all trying to work away at sort of the common goals, should we call it. But actually the biggest entities and businesses have the biggest opportunity to move the needle faster. So I come at it from a human capital perspective. I believe in the human potential, how we can all upskill. I'm looking at, future insights from what does the future of the workplace look like? What is the role of companies and organizations? So when I come here to the Dubai Future Forum, it's always great to sort of meet, people who really hold great insights that I can then learn and then hopefully adopt into the businesses. And my role is obviously supporting individuals, but also giving companies the best possible scenario and framework to sort of implement some of the changes. How do they work towards the UN SDG goals? How do they make it work on a commercial level as well? I think if we can help businesses understand how actually being climate focused, being responsible can actually be commercially viable, that's when we start to see a lot of opportunity. And there are some great examples out there. There's some wonderful innovative solutions across different societies, particularly from the consumer element, be it food, fashion, beauty, wellness, that I'm witnessing on a daily basis, which gives me personal hope. It's just, can we actually adopt it far quicker? But I believe in essentially the human potential, and to try and dispel the view that humans are inherently selfish. I'm trying to sort of debunk that theory and prove that, as we've seen in the past with things like the ozone layer, how people came together to sort of tackle that crisis. I've got hope that, humanity will step up and find a cause to get ourselves out of this mess. But it's not easy, as we all know. Marc, you've obviously just come straight out of COP29, fresh off the plane from Baku. I think always coming here to Dubai gives us that sort of sense of optimism. I know where you're sporting a new badge there, I can see on your show, which is good. It looks like an upgrade from the original SDG logo.
Yeah, it's basically the 17 Sustainable Development Goals built up in the form of the biosphere being the most important layer for us to protect. That's where we get all the resources from to build and produce anything from food to cars to computers on this earth. And then the societal layer of our world that we give education and infrastructure and societal needs, and then the economic needs that then feed to the Partnership for the Goals. And it's the first ever global people planet protection plan that we've ever had. 197 countries came together for the first time ever, unheard of, and agreed upon a roadmap towards keeping our planet at 1.5 degrees of warming. And it's the Sustainable Development Goals. And believe it or not, we're at the 29th COP, but guess what? We're only 5 years away until the Sustainable Development Goals go away, and we're way behind. And so the reason I have to be optimistic is when we decide to act on something, I've seen how these human beings, and the world just gets on this exponential path. And there's this biological living life system that I really love. And it's that 1 + 1 never equals 2. In all living systems and their subsystems, life, biology, ecology, environment, we're living beings. We're super exponential. We're verging on quantum mechanical beings. And if we harness and really realize the tasks that we have at hand, we can achieve the sustainable development goals, but we'll shoot beyond that. And as we talk about corporations or organizations that are really trying to move the needle into a better future and change how they produce, just make no mistake, we're not in the business of business. We're in the business of life. There is only life. And this work-life balance that you step into a sustainability role when you get to your job, that's never existed. There is no work-life balance. It's all one. There's only life. And if we realize that when we start to follow these universal principles of how life functions and works, it gives us this super exponential momentum to really achieve and make things happen. Right before Baku, we were at the Interdevelopment Goals Summit in Sweden, and they just released their new logo and that. But it's not like one day you work on the inner development goals and the next day you work on the sustainable development goals. It doesn't really work like that. You're always working on the inner and the outer, and you're always working on all of them because they're a system tied together. And when you realize that it's virtually impossible to just work on one aspect and quit using what we've done throughout history, this reductionism, this mechanization of human beings. I love how you mentioned this human potential. Let's realize that human potential and really come in and do this gravitational assist, this slingshot effect of human potential to really get us into better and brighter futures. That's really what I'm seeing is people are waking up towards, we can't wait for someone else to do it. We're a crew member of this spaceship Earth. And the more we figure out ourselves first and then join with others aligned, we can get that momentum to really solve and achieve great things.
Totally agree. Joanna, you mentioned obviously that you're working in collaboration with multiple businesses. And I think I like that sort of viewpoint. You know, you could be doing so much great work in the businesses that you currently work for, but actually that diversity of thought and taking out best practices. I mean, is that an easy task to actually get businesses not necessarily giving up like trade secrets, but obviously sharing insights that's working for them in their respective fields? I mean, is it an easy conversation to approach? Do you find companies are willing to sort of, all cards on the table, or, being vulnerable with each other, I guess, around what's working, what's not working? How do you actually bring those different businesses together to sort of have that open dialogue?
It's a lot easier than what I thought it was going to be. And I think it's because you have these people in organizations, whether you're in foresight or a lot of people in sustainability, actually, who feel not disempowered, but they want to do more. And they know that other companies have these similar people who are also trying to do more, that are trying to kind of break through and create more progress or help everyone think differently or move faster, or they feel like they have that human potential, but they maybe don't have the systems to enable any movement. So actually coming together, whether it's through FIG, where we have an NDA, so we're able to talk freely, or whether it's like I have so many organizations that just reach out to me, and I highly welcome it, who just want to have a conversation. So much of this tension is shared because we all want to make an impact. I think it's really challenging when you're inside of a business and you see the criticism that's faced on people who work in the corporate landscape, where a lot of this investment is put in, a lot of the innovation can happen, a lot of the support and advocacy can also happen. But it takes a lot of time. These are very complex organizations. These are generally businesses that have been around for 100 years or more. And they're generally run by people that are older, average age of 58. So how do you, as a person inside of the organization that believes in positive change, that believes in sustainable action, and you have other people in pockets of the organization that feel the same way, how do you think about the mindset, the tools that will enable you to be more effective at getting that kind of change? So actually coming together with people who are like-minded, who are facing the same challenges can be incredibly helpful and also just motivating because I think, we are an optimistic bunch, I think. We believe the world can change. We believe in innovation and maybe in the next 5 years we can meet those SDGs. Maybe not. We're 17% there, right? We're probably not going to meet it. But we believe, we have hope. And I think it's really easy to lose hope in the current climate that we're in and to take every crisis and every political movement and every target that we're off track on and let that compound and let it impact your hope. And, when we come together, we can overcome some of that.
Sharing the good word, I think it would help allay those sort of fears and that sort of waning of optimism, which is my biggest fear, is that people lose hope. That's why I think these communications and these sort of discussions are really important, sort of, keep relaying the message, ensuring that people don't give up on what we're trying to achieve. Dina, obviously something we touched upon last year, which I wanted to sort of bring back to the forum this year actually, is around the whole context around resonance and everything that you work on there. Can you give us a bit more insight into some of the areas that you're sort of trying to sort of bring to the forefront, please?
Yeah, and I just want to touch upon on what both of you were mentioning, and that's the crisis actually to see that crisis is a catalyst and contrast is accelerator of insight. So in this kind of situations, on one hand, people lose hope, but on the other hand, the process of getting an insight about different kind of things is much more heightened and accelerated. And these are moments in time to use to reframe them. And I think there is where art comes in, creativity comes in, and the freedom to detach oneself from the old perspective and look at things from different perspectives, not only one different perspective, but as many different perspectives at the same time, and then to include all the different aspects that inform that situation or feed into the current situation, and then see the world and everything that we're trying to solve from a first principle perspective, and to see that the point is actually to improve quality of life. And when we remember that as the direction that we are all heading, then the solutions come more apparent, and also the areas where we need to intervene pop up by themselves. And to what you were mentioning, the Resonance Project.Earth, which we started a year ago, is a social artivism global project or experiment where we try to touch upon the one dimension which has been left out at large in specifically in the climate change, but also all the crises that we're facing in the previous years and decades, and that's the individual inner dimension. And it's a very delicate topic, of course. It touched upon on worldviews, and we brought in a project that actually empowers every individual on Earth to tap into their own inner dimension through a already built-in tool, which is our own voice, and to use the humming, which is as the most universal language that we humans speak. And why I say most universal language? Because when we agree with something, we say mm-hmm. When we disagree, we say mm-mm. If we taste something delicious, we say or if we think about something and don't know what to say, we say hmm. So if you go on the other side of the world and you never have heard the language spoken there, with the humming, you can have a conversation, and very often much more precise one than if you use the same word but mean something else. And there are different layers of this global experiment, but one of them is to convey the message of where are we united? Where are our common denominators, so to say, as human beings in this world? And we are using this as a tool, actually, as a small Swiss knife, to give it to all generations, to all people, regardless of their background. And I love that we are here today in the Museum of the Future, which has a whole floor dedicated actually to the well-being of the future, and even one chamber exactly doing this, a collective humming exercise. So whoever hasn't experienced it, I invite everyone to go. I think it's the third floor, is the humming chamber.
I love that. It's when we're all, I guess, working towards competing goals, ideas, that universal language, a very simple hum can obviously sort of be extended so far. So I like that sort of creative element and bringing around that sort of shared harmony. It's a nice movement. Joanna, is there anything you wanted to lead with?
There was a question that popped into my head, which is around that kind of common language and the harmony that you're talking about. Do you feel like there is harmony around the climate change topic or around sustainability? Because obviously there are so many different issues that we need to tackle, different solutions, different priorities, different levels of investment needed, geographically different problems that we need to prioritize. Is it part of the reason why we're not seeing as much progress that we don't have harmony on this?
Well, I think the resonance is there. There's a certain aspect of harmony there, but it's more about coming together and aligning and amplifying because around the world right now, we're really not unified on things. When we first come together with people, as we say, just for a few seconds, close your eyes and imagine your home. And as you do this, think of what it looks like and maybe feels to you, what images it evokes to you. And when you have that image of your home pop into your mind, then open your eyes. And as everybody opens their eyes, then we show them a picture of the earth and say, how many of you thought of this as your home? Less than 0.0001% out of the hundreds of millions of people that I speak to every year say that it's the earth. Well, that's a pretty big problem because we're all on the earth. We all have different images as how we decorate our home and what it looks like to us. It's still our home, but it's not our home to everybody else. And we're kind of not on that same alignment of page. And so it's really good to use tools to bring us back towards that alignment. As far as what we're seeing with sustainability around the world, I think the biggest issue that we're seeing and running into is we have sustainable coal companies, sustainable gas companies. What the hell? How is that possible? That's a different definition of sustainability. And to sustain life is not the objective of where we want to go. We don't want to sustain the status quo. That's stagnation, and it's not evolution. It's just basically taking a point in time and say, we want to sustain that as long as possible. And so I think that sustainability definition is bad. And the biggest thing, what we're seeing is that sustainability for most people in the world, even not even businesses, is seen as a form of reductionism. They have to reduce their travel, reduce their consumption of meat, reduce their consumption of food, reduce their footprint, don't do as much because it's not sustainable. And that reductionism and mechanization of human beings, people say, well, I never got to enjoy real renewable energy. I never got to enjoy a real steak before. I never got to enjoy driving around in my car or refrigeration or whatever it is. But now you're asking me to go ahead and just do without and reduce. And so there's a lot of pushback. Well, in a world that is moving in the direction that we want to go as regarding sustainability, regeneration, resilience, it's not one of reductionism and mechanization and dumbing down of humanity or doing less harm or doing less. It's actually one of abundance. When we talk about sustainable development, what we're really talking about is evolution of how we want to live. Development is not something fancy. It's not bubblegum colors of the SDGs. Development is how we live. It's the built environment. It's infrastructure, roads, highways, homes, residential, commercial, city scale, country scale of how we live. And so what is sustainable development? Well, it's the same thing. It's the built environment, but it's different. It's an ecological economic model, and it's how we live. It's not perfect. It's just one step a little bit better, more renewables, more circular economy, LEEDs, BREEAM, ISO standards, just some kind of standard that's just slightly a step better on how we live in the future. But in reality, it's just an evolution. Do we want to stay in the caves or do we want to maybe evolve how we live and move into the future? And so the core is really understanding it's not about reductionism, understanding it's not about hurting the way you live. It's actually improving the way you live. And so that you can inherit that to your children and your family, but also so you can live much better in the future. They think there's some kind of like a lot of the time I hear from the SDGs, people say, oh, that's Klaus Schwab conspiracy theory. Well, no, it's not. It's about giving every human being the basic rights, giving us a way to live, better roads, schools, infrastructure. One more thing that kind of just hit the point home on what I'm saying there. Around the world today, we have this segment of children that's called the early learners. It's kindergarten, preschool, first grade, second grade, and third grade. Those 5 grades are the early learners just getting into the school system, the education system around the world. Globally, at 8+ billion people on our earth, we would need to build 66,000 classrooms every single week just to meet the development demands to give those children a classroom to go to start out their early learner education entry into the school system, so to say. Around the world today, every month, we don't even build 100 new classrooms, let alone 66,000 every week. And that was just one small aspect of development or that evolutionary process. I didn't talk about hospitals, schools, universities, roads, infrastructures, new buildings. Most of our buildings that we live in and around the world aren't so modern and wonderful like here in Dubai. They're actually behind the scenes. They're not passive houses. They have asbestos and poor condition, no sanitation, running water, outdated pipes, all sorts of things. That means humanity, we're evolving every day. We're growing. Those places where we live, they also need to be living environments that develop and evolve along with us. Because if they don't, someone is always getting left behind. And so in those terms of that education and what sustainability means, it's really about having a conversation with each and every individual, what it means to them and how it applies to their world and where they're at whatever level. Because the question is, what does a world that works for everyone look like for you? Not for Marc, not for the UN, but for you.
Can I just add something to that? I mean, you were saying about the harmony. Are we harmonized? And I think people sometimes misunderstand harmony as something everybody is the same. But actually, harmony is like a symphonic orchestra. They're completely different instruments with different way of producing music. But in the beginning, they always first tune in so that they can play the majestic music as a full orchestra. So I think that we do need the diversity, but we need to harmonize in a sense as an orchestra. And I think it's so important that we upgrade our understanding of success in business, and that win-win is outdated. Actually, we need triple win, which is the client, the customer wins, the business wins, but the greater good wins as well. And this is not a utopia, this is a reality. And specifically now in the sustainability agenda, and even further on in the regeneration agenda, actually sustainability or regeneration is synonymous with profitability. Just right now, there was a session in the main forum where it was said about practical utopia, or things that are maybe looked at as a distant future, but actually are applicable already now. And I think the speed is really important. We don't have time, not only because our personal lifetimes are limited, but our planet signals us that we do need to accelerate. And actually, there is no reason why we shouldn't, because it's not about only solving some crises and problems, but what is the purpose of solving those crises? It's improving quality of life for all living beings on the planet.
And I think I've found the common link here now with the conversation today, because it's definitely been, very different viewpoints, which is great for that diverse conversation. But I like what you've all sort of touched upon there. Obviously, the topic of resonance, the harmony, different voices, different instruments, if it's an orchestra, competing voices actually coming together to find that harmony. And what Marc mentioned earlier around, that image, think about what, your home, what means most to you. And no one had that view of Earth. There aren't just companies, there are just people. And without the planet Earth, there is no business. So it's actually sort of, reminding people what's at stake. And I think that's what these conversations are really good. And you're having the conversations from your own business point of view and what your competitors or from different business. I think that's where you then come together. There's actually harmony. You're all bringing sort of different viewpoints, different challenges. You're coming together and obviously then harmonizing and finding that sort of clear pathway, hopefully, by exchange of ideas. What works for you doesn't necessarily work for somebody else. And again, back to Marc's question, which I think we touched upon last year, which I think I even went to ChatGPT to ask that question, what does a world look like for everyone that works for you? Sadly, the computer answered that question before that we could really. So no, I think that's where I really like where this conversation's got to, is sort of finding that common ground there.
I want to follow up. If I went deep enough to answer your question to where you were kind of looking for in that question, but with asking ChatGPT and it knows the answer immediately, what does a world that works for everyone look like for you? For me, that's a no-brainer because we trained it. We trained it with our books and our intelligence, our writings, and typing it in and giving it trainings for these large learning language models. So we trained that. But what happened with our training as human beings? Why did the 3,800 plus people that I asked that question to, why did only 7 of them have an answer that was kind of similar? Where is their training? And that goes back to development and infrastructure. What is the school system? What is their family system? What are they reading? What news are they watching? Is it not important? Is it not a question that it needs to be addressed? Did we domesticate technology or did it domesticate us? And so there's a lot of questions that come out of that I think are really interesting. But I wanted to know if I went deep enough or answered your question without making it too big or grand.
Oh, I loved where you took it. And I also loved your build around unity, which is, I think, the point you were making. This idea or the question that it sparked for me was around sacrifice. So in a world of abundance, where we're trying to create solutions for everyone so that everyone has equal access to quality of life, it does rely on us creating more. And I think we've lost the concept of sacrifice, that there are some things that we just can't have or can't do or can't access. Maybe technology will create some solutions to that will enable us to, for example, attend the Dubai Future Forum without flying in, 2,500 people. But I think fundamentally as a human, maybe more philosophical concept, the idea that actually we can't have everything that we want, at least not right now and at the same time, is something that we've lost. I understand what you're saying and I agree with it, that the SDGs shouldn't be looked at as you have to keep cutting back and you can do less and your growth has to decline and all of these things that obviously don't go down very well with people. It's we have an instant rejection of that concept, which I think is very human. But that's how life used to be. We used to understand that concept, maybe driven by higher level moral ideas of things like religion, that there are certain things that you can't do and that you can't have. And I wonder whether we need that kind of thinking to be able to achieve what we need to achieve in the future.
I'm glad that you brought that up because I totally see how many people feel that way, but we don't need to do less or to consume less in that respect. If we have sustainable or even resilient, and especially where we really want to go is to regenerative futures, to regenerate everything we do, we can fly as much as we want as long as we're keeping those emissions in check. If we do it with sustainable aviation fuel, if we get fully electric travel, if we get fully green hydrogen, kerosene, aviation fuel from totally green hydrogen, it's no effect to the planet at all, then what would be the problem of flying if it doesn't harm human beings or the planet, doesn't create us another ripple effect? Why couldn't that regeneration give us the abundance that we could have more? Regeneration really is super abundance. It's more abundance than we have now. Now, when people talk about regeneration, they always think regenerative agriculture. Well, there's regenerative economics, there's regenerative business models, there's regenerative health and medicine. And regeneration is 3.8 billion years old. It's a symbiotic process that's been around since life on Earth, and probably even more because our timelines are off quite a bit on human evolution and life in general. The quantum revolution or quantum computing is a revolution of the green revolution. The reason we have quantum computers, or why we are so interested in quantum, is because we want to figure out how in the hell can a plant do photosynthesis, create oxygen, give us food, heal the soils, capture carbon, which is quantum mechanical, we're quantum mechanical beings. When you listen to the father of quantum string theory, he'll tell you that, quantum mechanical beings are us, our plants, our mycorrhiza, mycelium, birds, bees, trees, and they're doing these mechanical things that we could do as well if we didn't use that reductionism, if we didn't box ourselves into this reductionism, mechanization, if we really harness that true potential. So I think we're just looking at it a different way. I would not want anybody to change their eating habits or their life habits if it wasn't a better model to do more destruction on Earth. That's not what I'm advocating, consume more just the way we've always done it. No, I say you will be able to consume more if you would like to, if we're in a regenerative process of how we do things in our world in that model.
People think more is polluting, and yes, it is like that. And it is one of the problems is that our business models are built upon teachings, for example, by Peter Drucker. One of his definitions of business is to create new customer. Purpose of business is to create new customer. And that's already the wrong notion because the purpose of business is to improve quality of life. And if it's not about consuming more or less, it's about consuming higher quality. It's about bringing in, for example, beauty back to design, because they say what is one of the most important qualities of a sustainable architecture? It's beauty. It's not only the panels which are thermoregulating, it's the beauty, because which buildings we do care to protect. The ancient ones, which have been built by masters of different crafts. And if you look at contemporary architecture, there are just a few that do that. And one of the probably disciplines that will disappear for our age is antique stores. Nobody will like to collect anything that has arisen in the past couple of decades. And if we go back to the first principle thinking, or to ask ourselves the deeper questions or the right questions, and I often say there is no right answer to the wrong question. So first we need to go for the right questions. And this is what I do, for example, in my daily business. I'm the founder and CEO of Charisma Nova, which is a creative agency for future fit transformations, where I do consult businesses on how to make that shift in the concept, in their strategy, in their purpose, so-called, purpose values. Those have become buzzwords, but it's not enough to have a purpose or a set of values, because I say the mafia has it as well. It doesn't help. So it has to be a higher purpose. That means that serves to the greater good. And it has to be universal principles that serve life. So I think it's less the question if more or less, but to what quality. And also it's businesses, if they look about profitability, all they want is to earn more. But you can earn more if you provide greater value. You sell less items, but with a greater value. So again, also the business objectives are satisfied without any harm, and making people truly happy, even with objects which have been crafted with skill and with love.
Dina's really bringing us down a rabbit hole, because there's two more things I need to say. So in an exponentially growing world, our planet is growing exponentially every day. If you only do incremental growth or innovation, or incrementally move forward as an organization, you're actually going exponentially in the wrong direction, at the destruction and harm of the earth. If you hear these companies around the world, they say, oh, this year we're going to reduce our carbon emissions by 80%, or by 2025, we're going to go carbon neutral, or we're going to go plastic free. We're not going to use any more plastic. Well, what are they telling you? They're actually telling you that they're going slower in the wrong direction, or they're telling you nothing. They're saying we're still doing harm. We're just doing it 20% less or 80% less. They're saying, nope, we're still killing you. We're just doing it very slowly. So the way to get in the right direction is to completely stop and then go in that direction, because eventually when the earth makes that shift to 100% new, regenerative, sustainable development, whatever, there's still a lot of pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, plastic, chemicals that are needed to clean up, to restore and rejuvenate and regenerate our earth. And then that's the next big debate. Who's going to clean that up? Who's going to restore it? Because just because we change on a dime as a entire planet, they just don't disappear. It just doesn't go poof. Okay, the Earth stopped, and so now we're all good.
I think that's where it goes back to sacrifice, because the sacrifice is in the bottom line. So your bottom line will be smaller because you're going to reinvest that money towards all of those initiatives that make exponential progress on this, right? That's the sacrifice that obviously businesses will have to make, business leaders and their shareholders and boards, and obviously potentially even the employees that are working for these companies. It's an important point that it's a complex system, I think, is maybe the other running theme throughout all of this, right? There's no easy solution, simple solve, and everything is interconnected. And
Yeah.
that
I
that
think
balance is
you're
beautiful
right on
between
the
the two.
sacrifice and businesses not rewarding changing behaviors. I'm yet to see like an executive pay structure, for example, where KPIs are built in for leaders to take a sacrifice on the bottom line if it's being reinvested in regenerative practices, disrupting supply chains, the way that we produce, consume, and distribute products and services. If that can be brought in, then there's something for everyone. There's a long-term investment for the planet, then there's a short-term reward for changing those behaviors. People, unfortunately, will be motivated by financial remuneration and kickbacks in terms of like, their roles as an executive. But I think if that's what it takes, it's what it takes, I guess.
There are some companies that are starting to do that, actually, that the bonus of the CEO is based on if they can meet their sustainability targets. So we're starting to see a little bit of that coming in, but maybe it's not progressive enough. Maybe the timelines are too long. Maybe the targets aren't ambitious enough. So maybe it's just the tipping point of that.
Possibly so.
But I have to object because actually that's part of the problem of the hesitation. Why it is not embraced as with such an enthusiasm? Because actually we need to reframe that and look at it. Is it really a sacrifice? Can we look at this as an opportunity? Because it is, and there are more and more actually business models, economic models that not only reframe it but also really put it upside down with this, for example, triple win strategy. Is it really the only way, the way we've done it, or is it a much better way than we have never even thought about it? And that's where art and creativity comes into the boring arena of not only business, but also negotiations and finding practices, because what art is compelled to do is to look beyond the stars, to think without any obstacles of the impossible, and then bring it down to solve a concrete problem in a completely different way. And I think this is what we need, and this is what the Dubai Future Forum stands for.
Dubai Future Forum, they've always shown that investing and taking a risk, making big investments in crazy, big, hairy, audacious projects and goals has always paid off in the long run. But there's a lot more other results, some very recent ones that we're still gathering around ESG, environmental social governance, the new digital product passport requiring environmental social governance, not only reporting CSRD, digital product passport, reporting scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. And as they do that and they don't outsource it to a big five accounting firm, that they're required to do it in-house and have a team on there and change their business model. During the pandemic is probably the biggest result that we've had. All those organizations that already pre-jumped on the sustainable development goals, changed their organizational models for sustainable index funds, or even the triple bottom line at the time from John Elkington. During the pandemic, a time of war and conflict, as well as economic downturn that we've never seen before, all sustainable index funds outperformed their conventional counterparts. In the beginning of the pandemic, 25 out of 28 Morningstar review, Nikkei, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, Global S&P 500, all outperformed their conventional counterparts. They didn't have to lay anybody off. They didn't have to close their doors. They were actually able to pivot and deliver essential services, have the resilience to sustain each other during that time. Now, coming out of that into another situation around the world, we're seeing that it's 28 out of 28 on the Morningstar review. We're seeing that those sustainable index funds and everybody who's really jumped and went full board into that, they're doing great. They've got the results. So that pre-investment, instead of using a discount rate on the economics factor of sustainability instead of making that slight investment, it's a much better performer. It's not just an incremental nice win that can sustain you for a while. The Stern Review talks about it. There's numerous reports about there. So that lag in education, that lag in, oh, it's expensive to do that. Well, maybe in 2015 it was expensive to get on some of this, but it hasn't been for years now to make that effort. People are still kind of trying, oh, I got to catch up to the SDGs. I got to catch up to the ESG. Why don't you set the bar higher for your organization and become future fit? Why don't you start to invest in your job? If it's not just a job, if it's a lifestyle, if it means so much and you want to be around for a long time, wouldn't it be good to invest in the future fit and have an abundance? I think that's a better mindset. And everywhere we're seeing, it's just amazing. I mean, stranded assets and meat and fossil fuels, that's what they are, stranded assets. They're getting bailouts and monies and subsidies by the trillions every single day around the world. Well, that's a bad business model. These old business school ways, or the way we're looking at finance or monies, or it's expensive, that narrative is not true anymore. It's totally disproven. So that's outdated thinking. We're at the Dubai Future Forum. Let's really start thinking into the future. Let's be future fit. Where are the models? How do we get there? Because that saying, oh, we don't want to invest, that's incremental growth. And like I said, if you do incremental growth, you'll never get beyond 10%, and you're actually going exponentially in the wrong directions. Let's talk to those organizations, say, yeah, it's a tough investment. We're going to have to tighten our belt for a while to do this. The proof is different. There's so many sustainable development funds out in our world now, and the trillions of dollars. You know why they're not given out? They don't have enough sustainable development projects out there that meet the certifications of LEEDs and BREEAM and ISO standards of the Green Building Council to say, yeah, you guys meet those standards. Here's the money. They just say, oh, we'd like some of that money to do what? To do business as usual, build the world out how you used to build it, start a business how you used to do it. No, let's think into the future. And the future is well beyond sustainable. And it's definitely not in fossil fuels and those outdated. Why are we stuck in the old school and business models? Even for our policies and leaders, delegates at the UN and World Economic Forum, they're not fit for the future. A lot of them are in positions as politicians and bureaucrats that have no clue about the future of vertical farming, a future of cellular agriculture, these technologies that can really pivot us into a new world. And I think those are things that all of us need to learn on a continual lifelong journey to what does that future that we want to create, that core question, what does a world that works for everyone look like for you?
Maybe the biggest challenge is to understand that we only do not need only new solutions, but we have to look for those new solutions in new ways. Because if we look for the new solutions in the old ways, we will end up where we were. If you want to have something that you never had, you probably must do what you have never done.
I think we could go on a lot longer for sure. There's so
No,
much I
don't
wanted to
have
come
enough
back
content.
to. But we do need to wrap things up. But thank you, ladies and gents, both for your wonderful insights. And yeah, lovely to do a nice crossover with looking outside.
Yes, let's do it again next year.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.